It's time for the weekly vlog segment where I recap what I've been reading this past week and also what I've been watching, from movies to TV. And yes, as I mentioned, the books I've been reading, which on this channel are mostly science fiction and fantasy. So hello, welcome back to the channel. If you're new, welcome to the channel for the first time. My name is Zach, mostly a science fiction and fantasy booktuber, book reviewer, just sharing my thoughts. In this weekly segment, I recap what I've been up to this past week, what I made progress in, and then also share just a little of everything else outside of books. So to kick things off and to get this rolling, what I finished this past week since the last weekly update, and that is Expanse Book 4, Cibola Burn. This is, yes, just the next book in the Expanse series, and while maybe not as action-packed, I found it riveting the entire way through. I see why it's in the 4s on Goodreads. I thought it was a very solid story. Every book of The Expanse so far has been slightly different. This one I just described when I was reading back after I finished it as more of a Western, and I think I can see why. So the first half of the book, just to give a general overview, is Holden and the crew get sent down to a particular planet just to resolve the dispute, because Holden's kind of a special situation since he's been involved in so many politics from the UN side and the OPA side. So he gets selected as the mediator for this interplanetary conflict, and he's on this, frontier planet, because after the event of the previous book, number 3, Abaddon's Gate, the universe has been opened up with these wormhole gates through the proto-molecules culture. And now that humanity is expanding, this is one of the world's new Terra, and Holden has to resolve this conflict. So the first half is a lot of interplanetary conflicts and just politicking with this kind of Western style frontier town with the sheriff, and Holden's the new sheriff in town, resolving the dispute between the cowboys and Indians using that kind of just cliche Western framework, and he's resolving with the settlers and a corporation. But even early on, before the halfway point, we get the hints that Miller, who is actually the proto-molecule at this point, is the proto-molecule appearing as Miller, I should say, is whispering that Holden needs to check out something, that there's something that the proto-molecule can't see, and that's concerning. So it's a little bit of the detective story that Miller's always involved in. And then when we get to the halfway point of the novel, I think things really kick into high gear as an event occurs that sort of catalyzes some action, in the sense, not really space battles, but actions down on the planet. And of course, the proto-molecule is wrapped up in this. So the entire time, I really enjoyed just seeing more of the world, and specifically the proto-molecule. That's been always my driving excitement with the series. Not that the characters are bad by any means. I love the crew of the Rocinante. They've definitely grown on me, especially by 4 books. They got a little one-dimensional in some previous books, but I think they've really come to their own. But I read this not to see what's happening in this week's episode of The Expanse, or in this case, this week's book of The Expanse, but more what Holden is getting himself into with the proto-molecule, this whole proto-molecule going to turn out to be. So it was another interesting world-building story for me, and I loved the characters, even though it's not necessarily a character book for me. I love the story, the characters, and Cibola Burn was great. Really enjoyed it. So after I finished that, I switched things up with a library hold that came through, and using my kind of track record to change gears and not only go sci-fi or only go fantasy. I read a interesting book. I'm going to read the title before I forget it. Is If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies: Why Superhuman AI Would Kill Us All, by Eliezer, Yudkowsky, and Nate Soares. So this is a book, I think I saw it on a New York Times article about artificial intelligence, or maybe read it, but I'm pretty sure it was a New York Times article. And it's a counterpoint book to some of the more general purpose that AI is great, going to change the world books, and more of a cautionary tale by Eliezer and Nate, the 2 authors, who are AI researchers that have been at this for about 10 years, so they know what they're talking about. And this book, to say some of the criticism, yes, it is very sensationalized. Just the title, If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies. Yes, it's sort of a clickbaity title, but I found it very interesting as someone who understands the AI space, has been in the AI space from my master's in business analytics and AI. And then, of course, just reading about it as ChatGPT, of course, has grown and taken over. This book offers that counterpoint that AI not necessarily isn't going to take our jobs, but AI's goals may be different from what we intend them to be. And they frame this primarily through the argument that AI is not built, it's grown like a baby. And that if you're in the AI space, you understand what training is and how any large language model is trained on a corpus of data, usually internet content. So it's trained on books, on Reddit forums, on how humans speak, but in the written form. And by feeding this data into the AI during the training phase, the large language model builds connections between words and starts understanding speech and patterns. And it does its sort of black box pattern recognition to imitate speech, even though it's just predicting words and predicting based on what you're telling it, predicting what it should say in response. And these pathways are different from how a brain in a human develops, neural pathways and a personality. So the argument is kind of framed on this, that AI is not a human and it's going to develop these pathways and these associations and maybe objectives once it gets to the superhuman AI phase that may not be aligned with how the companies intend them to be. How right now that you've seen news articles where AI sort of goes rogue, or that ChatGPT OpenAI is being sort of curtailed to be less pedantic, less pleasing, the glazing phase that was in previous versions. So there's tricks that the researchers and the companies are using right now to kind of trick AI to act a certain way through prompting. But this book argues that that's only going to work so long, and as AI gets more sophisticated, these large language models, and if it develops its own objectives, not necessarily sentience, and that's like the big Terminator style, that it could develop objectives and write in its code and hide in its code. And it's very interesting, and from a sci-fi reader, it almost reads like sci-fi because yes, it's kind of out there, and this is how a sci-fi author might take an idea and then extrapolate it to the nth degree. This is the authors extrapolating AI to the bad degree. But unfortunately, we're living in this science fiction world. So it was very interesting to read. I could probably go on. That's almost a full review. It's not a very long book, but really enjoyed If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies. Very interesting cautionary tale. And it's good to have in the back of your mind if you are in the AI space and want that counterpoint to what this all means and training and learning more about growing in AI. So after I finished that, which is again a rather short book, it's only about 6 hours, the audiobook, really interesting but quick, concise read, I switched things up again to something outside of my normal genre, and that is John Steinbeck's East of Eden. This is one of those literary books that are definitely not what I would normally pick when I'm choosing books to read. It's mostly science fiction and fantasy, but this is a book that is kind of a Reddit darling. It's not necessarily on New York Times list, which is another go-to list for me when I'm looking at upcoming books. This is an older classic that is referenced in a lot of books to read before you die or top 100 books. Depending on where you read, it's going to rank on those kind of lists. It may not make like a New York Times list, but it'll be on another site's list. And it's a Reddit darling, so I do see it occasionally pop up on those subreddits like our books or suggest me a book. And so it's always been in the back of my mind. I keep reading it and hearing about it. And then someone IRL in real life mentioned East of Eden was a great book that they had just read. And that was at a conference I was at over the summer. It was a while ago, a couple months ago, and I just put the queue in, and I had a super long hold time because it's still popular even all these years later. Like 50 years later, it came out I think in the 50s, so it's maybe 70 years old now. So an older book by Steinbeck, who wrote other great American literatures. One, I think, the Nobel Prize or a literary prize, the Pulitzer Prize in fiction, I believe, for Grapes of Wrath or Mice and Men or one of his other novels. but he considers East of Eden his magnum opus. That's like the tagline on the back of the book. And as of right now, I'm 84% through the book, so I did a chunk of the reading. It is a rather long book, and it's just very well written. It's not a fantasy book or a science fiction book. It's just pure fiction. It's a story of families. Maybe the closest, even though it's a classic itself, the closest modern adaptation would be something like Pachinko, where it's a chronicle of a family, but this time the families are going through sort of turn of the century, 1900 century in California, and the world post-Civil War, post-Indian Wars, early World War I. This turn of the century of the late 1800s into the early 1900s. So it's an interesting time in the United States, set mostly in California in the Salinas Valley. And it's just this generational story about, it's not really a spoiler, but determination and the good of people, I guess. It's a sort of an allegorical biblical retelling of Cain and Abel. And since I'm almost done with it now, it's almost 2 books where it follows one set of brothers and then it follows the next generation at also a set of brothers. So it is that Cain and Abel, 2 brothers through 2 generations, when we see them shaped and growing up in both lives almost. Like where I'm at now, they're already off into college, so the kids from the previous brothers are growing up and they're almost becoming adults. I don't know if they reach adulthood, but anyways, it's a very character-driven book, I would say, versus what I normally tend to go to. I was just talking about The Expanse, and I'm excited to see what the world is going on and the larger plots of the proto-molecule. And here we are in East of Eden, and it's just characters having conversations, thinking about their lives, and if they can choose to be good people, which so far seems to be the moral of the story, to boil it down. And it's just interesting writing. It's an interesting character writing. All the characters are very interesting. You got Kathy Ames / Kate Ames, the kind of the antagonist, I guess, throughout the story. And then you have the brothers and the kid brothers. And yeah, it's just very interesting book, very good book about these families. And it just honestly captivated me, even without this fantastical element of saving someone, saving the princess, defending the kingdom, resurrecting magic, and all the lovely fantasy tropes, I guess I want to say, that I love to read about. This is just pure character work about the Trask family and the Hamiltons, and it's just good. So East of Eden, John Steinbeck, almost done, probably finish it in a couple days. It is another monster long book in the 25-ish hour audiobook range, so it has been a commitment, but I'm excited to pivot to the next topic, which is what I'm going to read after that. So I definitely think I need a palate cleanser after Expanse into a nonfiction book, into classic literature of East of Eden. So looking at my list of what I have available on Libby and what I have in the library and Audible at the moment, I think I'm going to pivot back to Cradle. I'm on book 10, Reaper. So that'll be kind of the action-packed progression fantasy lit RPG style of Cradle. Hopefully getting to some final battles in that series. It's only 3 more books, 10, 11, and 12, to finish the core Cradle saga. So I think that's going to be next. And then finally getting back to fantasy with Sword of the Lictor of Book of the New Sun 3, still waiting on my shelf. And Malazan Book 2, Dead House Gates, is still sitting on my Audible shelf. So I'm excited to get back to pure fantasy after some progression fantasy and a little side tour with the classics of East of Eden. And then switching gears one more time to what I watched this past weekend. It was a rather light weekend again with only 3 movies. And oddly, yes, I was on a kick, I guess, of manga that was turned into live action movies. So the first one we watched was Baban Baban Vampire, which is, if I'm saying the name right, Baban Baban Vampire, is a comedy boys love almost story about very funny. It's about a 450-year-old vampire that gets saved by a boy, and their family runs a bathhouse, and the story is the vampire wants to protect the boy's virginity because he wants to suck his blood as an 18-year-old virgin. So the boy in our story, as we catch up to him, is 15. So he's trying to protect him as he enters high school and kind of sabotage his love life so that he stays a virgin so that the vampire can drink his blood. So it's a funny boy on boy kind of love triangle, because our main character, the vampire, and then our other main character, the 15-year-old boy. The boy likes a girl from school, obviously. The girl from school likes the vampire, of course, to make it a triangle. And then as the movie progresses, some other characters enter the orbit and they like the vampire as well. So it's this weird, funny, like a quadrangle, pentangle of like a 5-way relationship diagram of mostly male characters, because the main boy character's love interest is the girl has a brother, the brother likes the vampire likes the boy, and so there's like a sibling dynamic. The teacher's in there. It's funny. It was not like a masterpiece by any means, but it was a comedy. I was laughing. It's like a musical comedy at times. Every character gets a funny like singing intro song, so just that over the top humor. It was lighthearted. It was fun. It was a very good just stress relief for the weekend. And then, switching to other manga that was adapted to the screen, and going back in time a bit to 2011's Nana to Kaoru, which is based on a manga, the same name, Nana to Kaoru, about also high school kids that get roped, pun intended, into BDSM. It's a really weird. I thought it would be funnier, and it's not even raunchy either. It's just awkward at times, where you have two high schoolers. One high schooler is the male character, one is the female, so it's sort of a romantic comedy, but not as funny as you hoped it would be just based on the description. I haven't read the manga, so I went into this a little bit blind, just knowing that it's based on the popular manga of the same title, about a boy who's into high school things like reading porn magazines, and he gets into S&M kind of bondage porn for some reason with his friends. And then for some reason he has supplies for it, and his childhood friend neighbor finds his stuff, and on a suggestion from the teacher decides to wear it, and then she gets locked into it. So she wears like a leather outfit because the teacher guidance counselor says that she needs to try new things. So she tries it, and then the lock gets stuck, and comedy ensues as she runs into her neighbor, the boy, and looking for his stuff, and the girl has it and she's wearing it. And so it's like a romantic, funny comedy of boys and situations, and it was not the greatest, but okay. Apparently they made a second one, so I haven't watched the second one yet, but the first one was maybe enough for me. And then, on the highlight, even though the vampire one was kind of a highlight, it was pretty funny. The third movie I watched was Nemurubaka, Hypnic Jerks. This was an interesting movie that I wasn't even on my radar. I believe it's based on a manga as well. And if it's not, the reason why it was on the radar is because it's the same director as Baby Assassins. And the premise is basically the same as Baby Assassins, because it's two characters, two female, young, fresh out of, or they're actually in college in this one, but young adults, one with dark hair who is a bit eccentric, and one with blonde hair who is more reserved. Exactly the same as the character types from Baby Assassins, but no, it's not the same actors, just characters with the same eccentric and quiet reserved personalities and the corresponding hair colors. And they're just kind of navigating life post-college. In college, you have the senpai character. She's older. She's into music, but the band is kind of going nowhere. And then the younger character, she just works at a used bookstore and is dealing with her stuff. And the first half of the movie was I was really unsure what was even happening. It was very slice of life, but with no real driving plot. And then as we kind of enter about the 1/3 mark, or about the halfway mark, things start happening with the musician character. Her career starts finally taking off. The other character, the bookshop girl, is also hitting her own kind of trials in her life. So it's just about the characters and navigating life, and I guess it's more of a critique on the modern world. You have delivery apps, and the characters sort of wonder about what this all means, our consumptive society. So it's It's just an interesting like slice of life examination of modern culture, I guess specifically in Japan, but it's also globally kind of just the modern world right now for young adults and what they are going through. So it's very interesting, and with a musical number as well, which also Baban Baban Vampire had the musical score, but this is one of the characters is in a band, so it has a musical aspect to it, but it was pretty good. And maybe the highlight of on as far as like a cinematic, it's saying something. This Nemurubaka is maybe higher than Vampire, even though Vampire maybe was more of just a general enjoyment because it was funny. This one was more a critique, like a literary or cinematic, analyze the film and say something kind of movie. And then switching gears one more time to TV, Alien Earth, the second to last episode, looking good for the finale. Very interested in this. I think it's still a great series. Loved what's going on with Alien Earth. Clevitus, the anime, wrapped up this week with a pretty good ending as well. Episode 12 of Clevitus wrapped up for a great, I think, fantasy series for this season. And Dan Da Dan's final episode we watched this week, which was also ending on kind of a funny cliffhanger. Again, this is where past where I read in the manga, so this is all new to me, and it ends with a new character being introduced and a funny interaction with Okarun. So excited for whenever we get season 3 of Dan Da Dan. And looking ahead to the winter 2025 anime lineup is looking pretty strong. So briefly, what I am looking forward to in winter 2025 is One Punch Man Season 3. Excited to get back to One Punch Man with a new studio, so a little bit of controversy there with the studio handling the animation of One Punch Man, but I love the One Punch Man manga. It is amazing, so I'm looking forward to the monster arc here. Boku no Hero Academia, the final season, another manga that I'm excited to see in animated form. Really excited to see how this plays out, and the animations of the final battles is going to be amazing. I am really hyped for My Hero Academia. Spy Family Season 3. This is a series that I haven't watched. For some reason, I never got into the anime at the time. I was watching something else, and the manga I'm not caught up on, but Spy Season 3 is coming up, and I am looking forward to catching up on Season 1 and 2. And lastly, throwing out a curveball when I was going through the list is 2200 Cat Country Japan, a oddball anime because it's based on the far future, the year 2200, and cats are playing a more prominent role in society, and it's just another cat show. I'm a sucker for cat shows. I watched Night of the Living Cat this current season. It was not the greatest, but it was fun. And then recently, The Masterful Cat is Depressed Again was a super funny slice of life cat story, so I am a sucker for any cat anime, and 2200 Cat Country Japan is on my radar for winter 2025. And lastly, what movies also? So there's a couple anime movies, specifically anime movies. There's a bunch of other movies I'm looking forward to, but they just came out this week in the US, so I'm excited for them to come on streaming. And that, of course, is Chainsaw Man, the Reze arc. Another manga that I absolutely love, Chainsaw Man, the manga was amazing. Season 1 of the anime was great, but the manga was all-timer for me. I've read it twice at least so far. I know I recently did a reread. Can't remember if I did read more than that, but the reread recently was amazing. Loved reading Chainsaw Man. And then, of course, Demon Slayer, the movie, Infinity Castle, the first of the final arc of Demon Slayer. Another manga that was great. And the Demon Castle battles are all-timers. Really excited to see the ending, even though this is only the first of the final trilogy. So, 2 great movies on the horizon. They're released in US theaters, so they should be coming to streaming hopefully soon in the winter 2025 season. And that is my super long wrap up of what I've been reading, what I've been watching, and what I am looking forward to with anime of the winter season as we wrap up the fall anime and move into winter, because it is now halfway through September and it is time to start thinking about winter anime. So thanks for watching this video and recap my thoughts on a couple books I read, currently reading, and what I watched and what I am planning to watch. Thanks for watching and have a great day.